I remember first hearing about the internet on an episode of Tomorrow's World back in 1994, and my mind being blown. Now, back then, we thought we were going to call it the information superhighway, and it promised to revolutionize our world, and it really, really did. Whether it was that realization that you're never going to have to use an A to Z again because online maps were so good, or the fact that you'd have access to infinite cat videos for the rest of your life. There have been so many moments of delight. But you don't need me to tell you that the internet has a dark side as well, because you'll all have your own story, or you'll know somebody who has. In fact, in 2021, a Pew Research study found that 41% of all adults in the US had experienced some kind of online harassment or trolling. And that term trolling, to talk about online harassment, has been around for longer than you might think. It was first added to the dictionary back in 2005, just as I was starting my career. And back then, I had no idea that it was something that would end up happening to me. And I really didn't have a clue about the literal transformative impact it would have on my life. So let me take you back to 2004. About 2 weeks after I graduated from the university in this lovely city that we're in, I walked into the BBC in Newcastle for a voice test for some work experience on the radio. Now, I grew up in South Tyneside. I didn't know anybody who worked on the radio or TV, but I'd always quite fancied having a go at it because it looked really pretty glamorous. And from the moment I walked through those doors, I knew that I was in the right place. Broadcasting, it just felt like home. And social media at that point was, I would say, in its embryonic stage. It wasn't something that we used for work. I might go onto MySpace to see if my friends were online, or send them a chat through MSN Messenger. And then a couple of years in, Facebook comes onto the scene, and I'd find my old uni friends, and I'd join brilliant groups like, not to be dramatic, but I would die for this cat. Still up there, actually, it's really, you could join it. And it was really, really good for a while. But things started to get a little bit darker. I loved the early days of the internet, but by 2013, it was a different story entirely. That was the year I had my big break as a TV presenter, doing breakfast weather across northern England. And despite the fact I had to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning every single day, I just really loved it. Loved doing TV, loved doing radio. And I started to post little forecasts on my Twitter feed as well. Then one morning, about 3 months into this dream job, I checked my phone, and I had a little red notification to say I'd been tagged in a post on Twitter. And this is it. Someone had made a screenshot of me. It said, "I'm a complete dog-faced bitch." And I stared at it thinking, what? A complete dog-faced bitch? Someone out there thought that I was so awful that they'd taken the time to make this picture of me. I felt humiliated, and I felt so vulnerable. My hands were shaking, my heart started to pound, and I just felt so humiliated. The worst thing was that someone had made this picture of me, and then other people were starting to endorse it by pressing the like button. Thankfully, I didn't respond to the tweet at the time, but I will admit that as the days went on, I kept going back to have a look at it to see if any more people had liked it. It's pretty compulsive viewing, actually, when people are saying horrible things about you. And to my horror, as the days, weeks, and months went on in this new career, more and more messages like this came, not just from the same person, but from many different people. Now, a lot of it was what some people might say is low-level abuse. It would be comments about my face, comments about my dress sense, comments about how fat I was, comments about my teeth. People saying that I was so ugly that they had to turn their televisions off when I came on. And after a while, it really starts to grind you down. Now, the people around me, my friends, my colleagues, my family, they were lovely. They really, really were. But I started to notice a pattern about the advice that they were giving me. It always followed the same kind of thing. Just rise above it. Don't feed the trolls. Don't let them get to you. And what really struck me at the time was just how difficult this advice was to follow. It felt almost impossible because it didn't make me feel any better. I still felt miserable and ugly and stupid, even more stupid, because I felt that I was unable to follow this advice to just rise above it. You know, sometimes a pathway out of anxiety and depression can be to take greater control of a situation. So I tried to do this by really trying to understand, going beyond the armchair psychology that I'd received thus far, and to really know why the trolling was hurting me so much and whether there was a better way of dealing with it. So, first things first, if you've been trolled to any extent, it hurts. And that's not just being overly sensitive. Neurologically speaking, it really feels like pain. In 2003, a study that was published in Science found that social rejection activates the same part of the brain as physical pain. It's called the anterior cingulate cortex. So when you're trolled by someone online and you feel that social rejection, your body starts to react as if you are under attack. Your amygdala fires up. It's a little bit like your brain's alarm system, and it floods your body with stress hormones. So what that means is that when you're sitting in front of a screen, you're otherwise safe, but you start to feel that panic. And we go into fight, flight, or freeze mode. So fight might be replying back with a snarky comment, saying something that you later regret in outburst. Flight might be feeling that you've got to delete your post or delete your profile. Or maybe you just freeze, standing there, unsure of what to do, but feeling absolutely stunned. And then you start going over it and over it and over it again in your mind. That's something called rumination, and it's really, really common after online conflict. And it's exactly what happened to me. Whenever a trolling comment would come in, I would start going over it again. So I could be pushing my trolley in the supermarket. I'd be thinking about the trolling. If I was in the cinema with my friends, I couldn't wait for the movie to be over so that I could refresh my feed and see if any new comments had come through. At the worst, the trolling would be the last thing I thought about before I went to bed at night, and the first thing I checked for when I woke up in the morning. So why do we care so much about what some random troll says online? For millions of years, humans lived together in cooperative societies that we know as tribes. Now, if you were cast out of the tribe for any reason, your chances of survival decreased dramatically. So research shows that social acceptance is something that has been wired into our brains. We really desire it. So when you're trolled online and you feel that rejection, our body starts to think that we're really in trouble. And when somebody says to you, just rise above it, well, they're asking you to override millions of years of evolution, and that's pretty much impossible. And you know, the emotional toll of trying to ignore your feelings can be pretty severe. It can lead to things like growing anxiety, self-doubt, depression, imposter syndrome. And when it's about your appearance, it can really start to rewire your self-perception. Research shows that teenage girls with high social media use are 3 times more likely to experience body dysmorphia. And 52% of teenage girls have been called fat or ugly online before they reach the age of 14. Now, trying to ignore those kind of feelings can get very dark very, very quickly. And that's something that I know firsthand. So growing up in the 1990s, I was really pretty lucky. I don't remember looking in the mirror and feeling that hatred of myself. That only started when I was in my 30s, after the trolling had begun. People would make comments about my hair. People would make comments about the moles that I had on my face. People would say that I looked like Noddy Holder. That's one for the kids. People would say that I looked like Boy George. People would say that I had summer teeth. Have you heard that one before? Summer teeth? Some are missing, some are crooked. It really hurts. It really, really hurts. I would have loved to have risen above it. But when you're told you're ugly 100 times, eventually you start to believe it. And this is despite all of the positive self-talk. This is despite my attempts to rise above it. This is despite being inspired by Michelle Obama's words that when they go low, we go high. It didn't make any difference. I felt so ugly that I couldn't understand why my husband had married me. He started to leave me post-it notes on our bathroom mirror so that I'd see it before my early morning shifts, telling me that he still loved me. And it still didn't make a difference. At the worst, I spent more than £5,000 on orthodontics and had cosmetic surgery to have a mole removed from my face. Not because I wanted to change, but because I couldn't deal with any more comments telling me how crooked my teeth were or about how gigantic this lump on my head was. So why do phrases like just rise above it, why do they fall so short? For me, I think it's because there's a disconnect between what we say and what we think we're saying and what people actually hear. So when we say just rise above it, we know that we're trying to say, you're a great person, don't feel this way, I don't want you to feel upset. But what a victim might actually hear is you're wrong to feel this way, you're making a fuss, it's not a big deal. And that can land like another blow. Instead of helping, these phrases just minimize the trauma and can leave people feeling even more isolated. So what victims actually need is not this quick advice. They need empathy. They need space to feel their pain without judgment. And studies show that when we feel that people really listen to us, our levels of oxytocin rise. That helps us to eliminate the levels of stress, and it puts us back in control. So what does that empathy sound like? Instead of saying, just rise above it, maybe you could say something like, gosh, that sounds really hard. How can I help? Or maybe saying, it's not a big deal. You could say, that is a big deal. What would you like to do? And people always used to say things like, don't feed the trolls. And it used to annoy me when people said that. I got infuriated because it felt like people were taking away my right to reply. But it is true that trolls thrive on instant emotional outbursts. And so if you can take time to pause if you've been trolled, it's a really good thing to do. It takes away their power. So if you're getting trolled, pause for maybe an hour, maybe a day. Pausing puts you back in control, and it will help to give you back that sense of purpose, give you back that sense of being in control, as I say. So, listening with empathy, taking the space to feel the pain and allowing people to do so, and giving them that space to pause as well. They're all really useful things to do when it comes to online trolling. But I'll be perfectly honest with you, none of those things fully broke the cycle for me. What did end up helping was something that I didn't really expect. So one day, when the sting had eased off a little bit, I found that I was starting to get a little bit curious about the trolls themselves. Who were they? And what was going on in their world? What led them to this behavior to think it was a good move? I found that the more I tried to empathize with the trolls, the more empowered I felt. And this wasn't about forgiveness or excusing their behavior. It was about really understanding their world. Trolling, it often comes from a place of pain. It comes from a place of insecurity and a hunger for attention. But it's also supercharged by the platforms themselves. So social media, it's all designed for engagement. Anger, outrage, and cruelty, well, they drive clicks. In 2021, Yale did a study looking at over 12 million tweets, and it found that the ones that got the most engagement were the tweets that were angry or full of outrage. And so what happens is that they're rewarded for that engagement, and you get this negative feedback loop where cruelty is what's rewarded. Platforms say they're doing all they can, but we do need to do more. But for me, it was this combination, seeing things from the troll's point of view, even if it was abhorrent, and understanding the platform architecture that supported it. Well, that was what eventually gave me my power back. It felt less painful, and it certainly felt less personal. Empathy was the key for me to really understanding, empathy for the trolls, and empathy for myself, I suppose. So let me leave you with this. If you or someone you know is experiencing trolling, you have to let them feel that pain. You have to try and empathize with them. Do what you can so that they know that they are cared about. And learn as much as you can about the social media platforms which are enabling this. The more you can understand about the algorithms and the architecture, the more empowered you will be to make the right decisions about how you want to use these platforms. And finally, if you are someone who is being trolled and you don't know who else to talk to, you can talk to me. You can find me, because I think, as we've discovered already, I'm pretty easy to find online. Thank you very much.